Okay, hi everyone. So we're here this morning with Dr. Kate Klemer, who will be sharing about the pause principle. So it's nice to see you, Kate.
Good to see you, Bella.
All right. So I'm going to get us started by just reading your bio, so everyone can get a little bit of a sense of who you are and where you're coming from with this work. So Dr. Kate Klemer has been practicing as a chiropractor and craniosacral therapist since 1989. She's an approved teacher through the Biodynamic Craniosacral Therapy Association of America. Her school, Divine Structure in Northampton, Massachusetts, focuses on teaching biodynamic craniosacral therapy through the perspective of listening with your heart and orienting to the breath of life. In her practice, she also utilizes genetic nutrition with applied kinesiology testing. Personally, she's interested in closing the gap of inclusion of marginalized people in our country through her life and work. Okay, so Kate, I'd love you to start off by letting us all know how you've interwoven and layered these different modalities with clients over the years. Kind of where did you start?
Sure. Way back in 1984, I moved out to Oregon to go to chiropractic school, and it was pretty much a calling because I didn't really know about chiropractic or anything. I just knew I wanted to work with my hands. And then my college roommate, her dad was a chiropractor, and I'd been interested in it. And I actually only went once, but I just knew I wanted to do that, work with my hands, and also be a doctor and diagnose and help people figure things out. So I went out to Oregon and started school in Portland at Western States. And I stayed with, someone who from Northampton that knew another person in Portland. And I stayed there until I found an apartment. And she was about a year or two ahead of me, and I went and got a treatment with her in the clinic, and she gave me a craniosacral session. And then that was the moment I knew why I came all the way out to Oregon, and that was really why I was there. So I went through all the training to be a chiropractor, and that was really good. It was really solid education, and very hard work, but worth every second of it, to realize actually how much I don't know. And and then I was in the cranial club, and then I took an upledger class with Clyde Ford, who is a wonderful person out in Bellingham, Washington. He's written a couple of books, and I just loved the work, and I just did that work for graduated and did that work for 10 years. And, you know, it, in the beginning, I always kind of snuck it in because I was really orienting to trying to get more of the public exposed to natural health care through insurance. And a lot more people could afford to come in that normally wouldn't be able to see an alternative healthcare provider. So I would kind of sneak in the cranial work. And I always did muscle work, and, I wasn't a big high force practitioner at all. And and then I'd always been studying applied kinesiology and nutrition. Always had an interest in that. And but then after 10 years of doing cranial work, I was like, is that all there is? I just felt like there was much more to it. And I talked to someone that had was from England, and she said, "Oh, the community there is a lot more. They have a lot more stuff going on. There's a lot more training in it other than upledger." And I so I went over and I took a class for osteopaths and chiropractors taught by British cranial osteopaths. And that's where I met Michael Kern. And then I asked him if he was going to teach. And he said, as a matter of fact, I'm teaching in Boston. So I took his training. And I just really click with Michael. He's a British osteopath, and he's Tibetan Buddhist. And he's just a really kind, open hearted human being. And I just really enjoyed studying with him. And then Catherine Nuclea, another British osteopath, was one of my teachers. And so it was a,
Teaching biodynamic craniosacral therapy or a different style than you'd known before?
the work has really evolved, but the training was called Biodynamic Craniosacral Therapy. And it was along the lines of Franklin Sills and Michael Kern and Michael Shea. And those are the authors that developed the work. It's different than James Jellis's biodynamic work.
Okay. All right. So is that kind of, well, you mentioned as we were chatting before, you have now kind of, you've learned these different ways of practicing craniosacral therapy and then done something else with it, something that's come from you, your own contribution. Will you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, my work it's really evolved over the years, because you just put your hands on people day in and day out, and you start to just you know I teacher trained for like, must have been maybe 9 years or something, or 8 years. I assisted 3 trainings, and I was pretty quiet in the beginning. I teacher trained mostly with Shariona Menzam, Sills Franklin's wife, and she's really bright person, and she also teaches continuum and has a lot of training. I think she has a doctorate in pre and perinatal work, and so I was kind of quiet in the beginning, and then after the third round, I was like, oh, I think I have something to say here about how I experience the work and how I approach it. And I think I want to start talking about this, and especially just from clinical stories that I've experienced in my practice. It's just like unbelievable, the things that happen in the work that you wouldn't imagine could happen. And I'm actually working on a book with Margaret Rosenau and Mary Gans and two other teachers, about really focusing on these stories, because there really hasn't been a book that's been written about the feminine perspective of biodynamic craniosacral. Most of the books, except Franklin's wife Shariona, have been written by guys, and we have a different kind of spin on things that we want to share. So
That's wonderful. And I mean, as a craniosacral student myself, it's always vastly more women in classes. Almost all, I've never been in one that didn't have mostly women
yeah,
in it. So
mostly
that's,
women and mostly men have been the main teachers and written
yeah.
most of the books. So I find that really interesting, and we just want to just start sharing our perspective and what we've noticed. And you know one of the teachers is a person of color. I'm an LGBTQ person, and Margaret is her own unique person, so we got all these different perspectives.
Yeah.
Be kind of fun.
Yeah. Wonderful. I can't wait to read that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man. Okay. That's so exciting. Well, we'll have to reconnect when you do that and maybe talk about it some way.
Okay.
Yeah. That's really, really cool. Um, I would also love just like a kind of a list of those teachers. We can kind of put it into the chat, which we'll be sharing with everybody. And I didn't mention at the beginning, but you made a really nice handout. So if people want to be kind of taking a look at that while you talk, while we have our interview, that would probably be helpful for you guys watching. And yeah, that's so exciting. You all are writing a book. Okay, so on that note, let's just kind of get into, so I told you ahead of time, like I've only studied with Etienne. I am still definitely a student of craniosacral therapy, and I know that a lot of people who come into classes have studied with other folks, but there's also quite a lot of totally new people who haven't entered this field yet and might be brand new right now at the summit. So what I would love is there's a few terms that you use pretty frequently, and maybe we can just kind of go through a little bit because I really want to get into the pause principle, the real meat of the talk, but a little overview kind of on these few terms that come up all the time: the long tide, the still point, and there's a third one that I can't find. What was the
Relational field, yeah.
Okay, yeah, the relational field. That was the one that made me the most curious. It's like, okay, what is the relational field?
Yeah. Yeah. So the relational field is basically like right here, you and I, it's the connection we have talking to each other. And when you're in a biodynamic session, safety in the relational field is a huge part of what creates regulation of the nervous system and settling between people, and so that their neuroception, as Dr. Stephen Porges talks about neuroception, like their perception of safety. Basically, when there is a strong perception of safety, particularly that the practitioner instigates um, and co-creates with their client, it creates more settling so that the breath of life can come in much more strongly into the session, because there's like a holy, I'm half Irish, is like a holy trinity. You have the client, you have the practitioner, and then you have the breath of life. And so the breath of life knows uh, how the practitioner can be of highest service to that person and in its expression. And so, one of the things about biodynamic work is it's very slow. There is a settling that happens between people. It's not like this usually doesn't happen where you go get one session and you're like, oh, yeah, I got my tinnitus repaired, or I got, my wrist repaired, or my hip, or headaches, or it's a deepening into relationship with the practitioner, kind of teaching them non-verbally a lot about how to be with their nervous system, because you have like your nervous system that does these kind of neuroceptive, am I safe, I see it all the time with students when they come into a training. It's like sniffing out the training. Shariona used to talk about this, sniffing out the training and what's going to happen next, and who are these people, and are they safe people, and do I need to stand back and make sure that they're not going to do something to me, or can I settle, what are they about, just like when you meet anybody.
Yeah. Well,
And
and that's, I think, extremely important in both the class setting for Cranio and also obviously the session itself. But that class setting, there's so much experiential change that we go through as a student in a craniosacral class, that safety, oh man, when that's not there for whatever reason, is just, and that could be, coming from the inside of the person, from whatever, all of our traumas and all of our framework we walk in the door with, to if the person sitting next to you isn't quite jiving, to whatever it is, too hot in the room, all kinds of things, right? Make it hard to settle,
yeah,
or can make it hard to settle.
yeah. Speaking of hot, I'm hot because I just did a 23-mile bike ride.
Oh, good for you. um I had one thought while you were speaking about that rapport as well, that I was talking to a good friend of mine recently, and she was saying there's been a lot of research studies done on how, this was about psychology, but about how the rapport is the most important thing with a therapist, and that the rapport is by far and wide has a bigger impact on the effect than the modality even.
I would
And so, yeah. I thought that's interesting. There's actually research proving that. And I mean, man, yeah, you take the most intimate space for healing the deepest things that we've got, which is, I think a similar thing with psychology and craniosacral therapy, if we can go there as a client, that is a really big deal.
Yes, and you know, the more I read, the more I understand. One of my favorite books I read recently is called Nurturing Resilience, Kathy Kane and Stephen Terrell. And it comes from the SE trauma world, but it really helped me understand what my version, at least, of biodynamic craniosacral is about, which is when you go through the holistic shift, which is basically when the system becomes a whole unified field and less specific areas of where there's blockages or inertial fulcrums, we call them. And you have an awareness of their body and their fluid body biosphere, um, that boundary, possibly the mid tide. Then there's more of a place that you're relating to people from a place of non-judgment, a place without the ego there, and the ego being the primary upfront connection with that person. You're just being with them. And that settling really supports the blueprint and the health to come forward and the breath of life to arise. And so, this book, Nurturing Resilience, what I realized after I read that was something I felt anyways, is that when I'm a practitioner, I'm holding like everybody's young ones, like their little ones, because
Oh,
it's nonverbal. So you're holding like this vulnerable young being, and the work can bring a person quite easily back to those young states, because those states are where those primary imprints are, and also those states are where the blueprint is like so strong. I love working with little ones because the blueprint's like right there. You don't have all this ego stuff to work around or with.
can you explain what you mean by blueprint a little more?
Yeah, so Anna Chitty talked about this. I don't know if it came from her or John or both of them, but she started using that term blueprint, and forgive me anybody if I didn't credit them, but basically it's Dr. Becker. He talks about the health with a capital H. And the blueprint is that intelligence that is breathing through the body and directing your cells to function. You don't have to know what all your cells are doing. They function as a unified field. And the blueprint carries that. It's always there your whole life. And in biodynamic cranial, we're really orienting to that. That is our major orientation, is to that blueprint.
That's really interesting. I think that it's easy when you've been sick a long time to kind of forget the original blueprint at the conscious level.
Yes.
So how you can be reminded.
And that's why this is so unusual, because most modalities, chiropractic, where is the joint dysfunction, or where is the organ dysfunction, or where is the imbalance, or um, the autonomic nervous system issue, very analytical. Medicine, biochemistry, where's the imbalance? So acupuncture, you could tell, I'm sure, checking the pulse, looking at the tongue, all these things. So this is really different. It's like, yes, I see that, and we're orienting to the blueprint.
Yeah.
That's what we're holding.
Yeah. In acupuncture, there is actually a blueprint concept, the Jing, which is like the kidney essence,
Uh-huh.
and it can feel through the pulse. So there is actually a similarity in that, just, a different metaphor of listening to the pulse and connecting with that blueprint. Whereas it's, whereas it's where is it stuck or where is it blocked, basically, like acupuncture is all about removing blockages. So where is the block on what level? And that could be different levels of consciousness or awareness or physical stuff, kind of all of it.
And I
Yeah.
really do think that, you know, craniosacral has been, it's basically all alternative indigenous healing practices from Native Americans, Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic, bringing these concepts into Western society and kind of like using different words to say what those things have been doing for thousands of years.
Uh-huh. Like a night, like just like a little language update.
To,
Okay.
to make it a little bit more palatable
Hmm.
to Western thinking.
Yeah, just a frame of reference that's within the culture that it's working within. That kind of it makes sense as an easier, just kind of an easier lead in, I guess, or an open door in a different way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, can you explain? Hmm. Let's see. So many different ideas. I think that the two big things I want to hear about are nervous system regulation and co-regulation and how that interplays in your work.
Yes. So nervous system regulation is starting to have that awareness of, I keep wanting to call it nociception, which is pain, but neuroception. So just having that awareness of, oh yeah, I feel warm, or I feel tired, or I feel tingly, or speedy, or fuzzy, or those kind of things. Like starting to have a language to describe what you're noticing in your body. And I think it's when you regulate your nervous system, you start bringing in and developing a witness to yourself, just like in meditation, and almost like a body scan meditation, and not getting into the story of what that means. And oh my goodness, I'm really warm, and that means I have a fever, and I better go get checked. I might have COVID. And, like that is the nervous system speeding up right there, right? That's the nervous system going into fight flight a little bit, right? So that is starting to go into a little bit of dysregulation. And so the way that you would work with it is you would go, hey, you know what? I'm just going to take a breath and just slow my system down and look around my little room here, and nothing is happening, and I'm okay just now. And no, I don't think I have COVID because I feel pretty good, you know? And or noticing states of more freeze where you feel, this woman wrote a really good book, Deb Dana, um,
Okay.
polyvagal. She wrote it with the forwards by Stephen Porges. Stephen Porges is like the king, the god of regulation, nervous system stuff. But this is a great book, Deb Dana. Um, and she talks about this ladder where, one of the things I do with my students is I say, where are you on the ladder today? Are you in sympathetic nervous system, a little speedy, or are you like having a tough time waking up and getting going in the morning? Like, and how can you pull yourself into this window of regulation? Now, I didn't do the SE training. This is all just from being a nerd and reading and teaching. And um, an SE trained person might have a really different spin on it. But the take home is that when we stay in states of dysregulation, it creates autonomic imbalance. And as we know, as cranial people, autonomic imbalance creates health issues, hypertension, depression, anxiety, digestive
Digest.
issues, right?
Mhm. Sleep.
Sleep. And so, what I try to do with students is really teach them about co-regulation and self-regulation. So self-regulation is just noticing your own system and working with it to balance it out and bring in awareness of what your nervous system is doing, because it's a physiological phenomena. Like if something's about to fall off the counter and they grab it really fast, those reflexes.
Oh yeah.
It's a physiological phenomena where it's like, whoa, I saved that glass. And your sympathetic sped up. And before you know it, you grabbed it and stopped it from hitting the floor. And so that physiology, afterwards, you might feel that speediness in your system. And so I think what's happening a lot is in the past people would go through things and I don't understand why I feel shaky, or I don't understand why I can't get up out of bed, or but when you start to understand kind of like how your nervous system works and how it is and how to keep it in regulation, um, you can start to recognize those states and not blame yourself and blame other people. You can have empathy and compassion for yourself and other people. And co regulation is the highest level that we can have towards health, because co regulation is the social nervous system, and that is how we are wired. That's how we are wired, is to co regulate with other people. And that's why I talked about the marginalized community. I mean, I kind of am going right brained way out there, but marginalized communities need co regulation from the mainstream, communities. We are one unified field as human beings. And that means inclusion and, you know, checking in, like with my Asian friends this weekend, like my Asian niece, like, how are you doing with this news? I'm really sorry. Like stuff like that. That's co regulation. Their nervous system goes, oh, a white skinned person is checking in with me and has some understanding that this could be hard for me. I may not feel safe. So that's like a big, like, world view of co-regulation. But in the cranial world, that co-regulation, clients learn that off of you, how you are with your nervous system when you give sessions.
Okay. Like as a modeling type.
So if you come in and you're dysregulated, you just saw some awful news and you're really upset and you don't know how to bring yourself into balance after seeing that. That's why I can't watch the news too much. Uh, if you want to practice those skills on your system and not expect yourself to be perfect, because things are gonna affect you, but bring those skills of getting into that neutral space, dropping underneath the ego, dropping underneath the um, activation, and maybe letting it discharge, or maybe noticing it, naming it, and resourcing your system. There's different ways you can work with it. Calling up a friend, talking with somebody, having somebody hold your shoulders or your feet. um, there's lots of different ways that you can co-regulate, but that is the most powerful way, because, and then I'll stop talking. The ventral vagus nerve innervates your heart and your lungs. It's a motor nerve, and It is the only brake, like on a car or a bike, it's the only brake on the sympathetic nervous system, the fight flight nervous system. So without the ventral vagus vagal brake, the sympathetics would be just like
Yeah.
horse running wild for days, which is nice, but the horse will get tired. Horsey will get tired. So when we connect with other people, we're strengthening that ventral vagus. And it's that nerve is hardwired to be very connected to the cranial nerves, the trigeminal nerve, the facial nerve. And it's much of that is learned from when we're being um, with our mother or whoever took care of us when we were little. That co-regulation, we learn to regulate off of mom or whoever took care of us. Um, and those skills we take into our life as adults. And then we, you know, and a lot of us may not have learned enough of that. And so we're like, hey, I'm going to go to Craniosacral school with Kate, and we'll be working on some regulation, co-regulation, self-regulation skills, because you can't open your heart and mind to the breath of life when you're in dysregulation, right?
Mhm.
I mean, you can do it with chiropractic, you could do it with massage therapy, or probably physical therapy, probably being an ER doc, right? But in craniosacral, you can't really get away with that.
Just one of the reasons I think it's so effective. I think there's more and more evidence out there about the mind. It's not even like a mind body connection, right? That's like makes it too distant. The mind and the body, it's all one thing. In Ayurveda, it's all one thing. It's like a little triangle, mind, body, spirit as one unit. And what happens, our experiences lodging in the body, mind, or whatever we want to call it, has a major effect. I think that you can't reach on just the physical level. There's got to be this like getting underneath chronic things and trauma and old things and you know
And
uh,
yes, and I had some very interesting experience in my original training back in the old days, and graduated 2001. I had some very interesting experiences when I was a student that were pretty much life changing. That, no one had ever worked with my system in that way. And so things started to come up for me
Mm.
during my training. And then I was like, wow, this is why I like this work so much. I come from a very sympatheticized family. I was the youngest of six children. I have four older brothers. There was a lot of teasing and wrestling and wiffle ball games and kickball games in the backyard and arguments, and so it's like I didn't I just that was just how I was raised. And then I knew, I was like, okay, I need a break from that, and I need to find some other things. And then I got on the road to the craniosacral road, and then I got in the biodynamic training, and it was a real mirror
Mm.
to my nervous system.
Wow. It's amazing how much we can learn as adults, you know, no matter what the childhood, like no matter what the experiences. It makes me think back to that term, the blueprint, always being there, always being accessible with the right help and the right connection or
Yeah, and it's such a relief, Bella, because it's like it's always there. You can always count on it. The mid tide is, it comes and goes, but you can access it. The long tide is always there. It's like a pal you can just lean into. the more you know how to connect with it. But it's there no matter what. No matter what is happening, that is there. How many things are like that in your life as a human being?
I think zero.
Right.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
So why don't we talk a little bit about the pause principle? Because that is really some skills people can do at home on
Yeah.
how to self-regulate. And maybe I'd love also to talk a little bit about the co-regulation aspect of that as well. And yeah.
Yeah. The pause principle is, I'm gonna really. It was developed by Ray Castellino, who sadly recently passed away, and he teaches. He developed this work. He was a chiropractor and cranial therapist, and he developed this work around working with babies and families and really strengthening attachment and working with attachment through a somatic way of doing it, a somatic psychology way of doing it. And developed these birth process workshops. And so he started talking about like what creates safety in groups and what creates safety in families. And then Myrna Martin teaches trainings. She's around still. She's a good friend of mine, and I'm going to actually take her training soon. She teaches up in, well, she teaches everywhere, but she's from Nelson, BC. And it really interfaces well with biodynamic cranial because it's about working with those early imprints and babies and, all those attachment things. But Ray um, developed the pause principle, and forgive me if I didn't credit anybody again, but that's how I learned it. And basically, it's just a way to, in the classroom, if someone is sharing a story that it's affecting your nervous system, you're feeling your heart rate go up, or you're feeling yourself space out because it might be a hard story to hear or it resonates with something in you, that we call a pause and just take a moment to come back into our blueprint, our midline, orienting to the health, and just slowing things down or bringing awareness of the body in, and then starting back and say, okay, I can start up again. And so what I try to do now with my clients and my students and myself is just do that throughout the day.
Hmm.
So with myself, and in your family, you might have to like train your family, like, hey, this is what it is. And if you need to call, it would be very different probably for a lot of families. But, you could do this with your children and your partner, and, like you could bring it into the whole safety and settling in the field. But basically, it's just noticing what's happening for you. Just
Back to the like describing words you were saying of noticing in the body.
particularly through the body, because it's much more neutral, right?
Hmm.
It's not like I'm irritated, right? It's more like, well, what does irritated feel like? Tightening of the neck, tightening of the jaw, tightening the shoulders. The eyes get very focused. I was trying to do this tax prep thing and I couldn't find the thing on. I started noticing my nervous system, you
Oh
know,
yeah.
just that kind of thing. It's like, all right, I'm going to just take a little pause here and just slow things down. Maybe I'll take a break and just shut the computer, come back, go outside, look at the birdies, you know,
Mhm.
the wind, watch the wind blowing the trees. I don't have to do this right now. I can come back around to it a little later. And then my nervous system comes back into regulation, and then you have more heart rate variability, which means that your autonomic nervous system is much more in a functional range of health. And, there's different ways to do it, but mostly it's just noticing the physical sensations and then maybe being able to name the emotions.
So it's
But
very simple.
what's that?
It just sounds like that's very simple. That's just a really, really simple thing to do if you can remember to do it, sounds like to me.
Very simple.
Kind
And it
of.
kind of gets you out of the trauma trance of
Mm.
who did what and what's doing this and why did that happen and yeah, yeah, yeah. It gets you into more like, wait a minute, let's just slow down, maybe take some space or ask for support or, take a break or take a timeout or take a pause and just let's just like come back around to this. Um, because what happens is, you know, um, in relationship especially, is we tend to speed up and one person says something and the other person, if people don't do this in relationship, then they're not really in them. But one person speeds up and the other one speeds up, and they're off like racehorses, right? So it can be really helpful to just notice what's coming up, especially in your body. And one of the things that I use a lot are my bones. I don't know if it's because I'm a chiropractor or I'm Irish or Jewish or whatever, but my bones, I use my bones to settle. And I find my bones are grounding, they're neutral. It's not like settling into my adrenals or settling into my brainstem or settling into, I don't know, the organs, which have a lot of feelings. Organs carry a lot of emotions. But the bones I find are pretty neutral place and grounding. So, I just, oh, there's my spine. There's my pelvis. Yep. I can feel my femurs and my feet and tib fib. There they are. Ah. And it helps me just kind of settle.
And you teach this as to both your students and your clients, right?
Yes, because I have quite a few clients that have anxiety.
Mhm.
And it's interesting because I do a lot of nutrition work as well. And I have to talk to people about, like, hey, it's not just about what you eat and your supplements, it's also about your feelings and your nervous system and teach them how to work with that. And then I have craniosacral clients that come in with some trauma and anxiety and, you know, autonomic symptoms of, hypertension and TMJ and tinnitus and headaches. And, there's always emotions coupled in. You can't separate, right? It's like splitting a hair. So there's always, I mean, like probably 90% of the time, there's an emotional layer, there's a there's a physical layer, there's a spiritual layer, there's a mental layer. And so um, teaching people how to work with the pause and work with their nervous system and know like it's normal for these things to happen. There's nothing wrong with you. It's just your nervous system doing what it does, and you just need to learn how to drive that car.
Yeah.
Some people have Ferraris, in Ayurvedic medicine, right? Like the Kapha people are more like a big heavy truck, like a real steady truck, and then the Pittas might be a different kind of car, and then like a Vata. What's that?
The Pizza would probably be that Ferrari, like a red Ferrari.
Yes. And what would the Vata be like?
Oh, like um I always think of it in this, it sounds like it's being judgy, but it's not. I just like use jokes, but I see like there's like Vata's like kind of it's not regular, right? Irregularities and the mobile quality and like maybe starting and stopping like an old clunker that might be sort of like falling apart a little bit. That's like the Vata. So like it's great sometimes and it breaks down. It's like you just never know what's gonna happen. It's like a lemon.
Yeah, so if somebody knows that they're driving a kapha or a pitta car, or that's your nervous system. It's like, oh, and then there's more detachment, and then there's more like,
I got the metaphor for the Vata car that's so much nicer.
yeah.
It's like an electric car, right? Because the Vata is like the nervous system. But I just bought a car and I did some research. I was like, oh, I'd love an electric car. But in a normal outlet, it takes like 21 hours to charge from a dead battery.
Mhm.
I'm renting, I don't have a garage. It's like not possible, right? So I would say like a Vata's like that, like go, 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 go. And then needs all this recovery time because there just isn't that much reserve. It's like an electric car.
Yes. That's a hard nervous system, right? That's a hard nervous system.
Oh yeah. Especially right now
Mhm.
in the world as it is.
Yeah.
So as you're talking, I'm like thinking about how there's this modeling aspect of the nervous system of all these things we learn maybe in childhood, maybe from prep, maybe from a practitioner, probably from a practitioner. Um, and so as a student, you become kind of you need to do that, right? That's part of the work you're bringing to the client is this ability to settle, right? I would imagine that's part of why your students need to be getting really, really oriented and clear with their own nervous systems.
Yes. And, students, a lot comes up for students, and they can get pretty activated in training by other students,
Mhm.
by the teacher, by the team, and they're going to have problems if they don't understand that it's not about those people, that it's about, unless of course something big happened, but it's actually about something probably really young and really old, or something in their childhood that might have kind of queued up their nervous system. And now it's like, hey, now this person is bringing that imprint up for you, and um, just observe it and go get support outside of class with, some people who can help you understand these things. But the students sometimes can forget, like, the teacher and the team are part of co-creating a safe relational field. They can be this traditional thinking of like the teacher's up there and the team is up there, and I can kind of like just, project all this stuff on them and kind of make it all about them, that they're not doing this and they're not doing that, and da, da, da. But actually, in actuality, it's a space where they can actually really take a look inside their shadow, which is what this work does. The breath of life, if you're really working with it deeply, it's going to shine a big light on your shadow. And this is, I don't want to scare people. I don't want to scare people from doing the work or taking the training, but that's part of becoming a good practitioner, is being able to look at your shadow and not blame other people around that.
You talked about that in your first lecture with us in November. So I would just recommend everybody watch your lecture from that session. It was really, really good, all about the shadow.
We all
Yeah.
have one. I mean, it's part of being human, and it's not like you shouldn't have a shadow. I mean, it's impossible not to have one. It's good to know what it is, and when you're having a strong reaction to someone, to, you know, take a look at, like, well, what's going on here? You know,
Mhm.
what is this bringing up for me, that it's reminding me of something? you know?
Hmm. And then that's going to be, from what I'm gathering from what you're saying, like could so easily be portrayed into that, what did you call it, relational field,
Yes.
whether it's a positive settling, positive modeling of like a settling of the nervous system, like a reference point.
Yes.
Uh, like I have people I can think of when I'm dysregulated. I can think of like my teacher, Dr. Ladd, and his like very sweet and gentle, soft nervous system. Just talking to you, you have a very like quiet, slow, like centeredness to you. And I'm like, I can feel that like through the screen, you know? And so that relational field, yeah, it's up to, right? It's up to you as a teacher and then a practitioner to create a lot of that fabric.
Yes. And that's like you were saying in the beginning, like that's almost more important than the session.
It's amazing.
But one thing that is really cool is that when you've worked on your imprints and you become friends with them, become friends with your imprints, and you know when they're arising, and you know that maybe you need support. Like when you need support, you call someone up that you can talk to about this, or you go get a cranial session, or you go get a massage. That when you're giving a session, when you're in the relational field with a client, and you're holding their head, and you were feeling pretty good. You had a nice bike ride on the one of the warmest days in New England this year so far. Outside, sunny, blue skies. You're in a good space, and then you come and you put your hands on someone's shoulders or feet, or you settle, and all of a sudden you start noticing something coming up for you, like a tightening in the chest, a tightening in the throat, and some sadness maybe. Then you can start to, you're feeling what they're feeling. You're picking up on the relational field about what they're experiencing most of the time. Now, it might resonate with something you've experienced, and you might be like, oh, I understand this very well. I've been here before. But also in your physical body, you're naming, my chest feels a little tight, my throat feels tight. If you're in the tides, which is a really resourcing place to be, the mid tide or the long tide, it's a very safe place for those things to be. And so they're not overwhelming. When those things are in relationship with the tide, they don't overwhelm people. And as a practitioner, what you do is nothing, but you're just listening, 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 orienting to the blueprint, and you're going, where in my body do I feel settled? I'm going to settle into my bones because that's a big resource for me while I'm holding this person with these things. And I'm just going to ask them to remind me of their resource. Remember that thing that helps you feel settled and calm? It's either external place or an internal place. Can you just focus on that right now? How are you doing just now? What are you noticing? And they'll tell you, like, my throat feels tight. I'm seeing pictures of my mother, who that maybe they just lost or something. This is all nonverbal, but you knew that before they said, because you feel it, you know. But if you haven't done your work around that settling of learning how to settle your nervous system and learning how to work with those parts of yourself, you can go in there and go like, oh my God, what's happening? My chest is tight, my throat's tight, and
Yeah.
this is scary. I'm getting anxious. I have TAs do that all the time, first time TAs. They're feeling the field. It's a very powerful field because it's a group of people, and they're feeling into the field, and they don't have that settling down quite yet. And it can be really tough on them because they're like, whoa, I got to really learn to regulate here because there's a lot I'm feeling in the group, from the group.
Wow. Yeah, it's a lot to hold as a practitioner, and a new practitioner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so one of the things, it's a lot easier when it's just one person.
Mhm.
Um, it's a lot easier when you have self-care and you have supportive relationships in your life. You have a dog, and it's, you know, you just change your biodynamic craniosacral makes you change your life so that it's more supportive. It just, you have to change your life to be supportive of your system, to be a biodynamic therapist, in my opinion.
I think that's really beautiful, and I think it's really, I mean, I'm a student. I don't have a real good nervous system regulation skill set yet. I'm way working on it, and I'm very happy still learning and not practicing because I don't have that like get back to center after like while having my hands on somebody, and certainly not in frequently during the session. That actually sounds like, okay, that could be a way to work with that, to like reorient in the bones. I keep hearing this phrase, I know it in my bones, as you're saying that.
Yes.
Like there's a surety and a certainness and solidness in the bones, and kind of like, yeah. Anyway, yeah, it's interesting. Um,
And I would disagree, Bella, because I think you are pretty regulated. You're here doing this interview. That would be hard for someone who is very dysregulated.
hmm, well, thank you. Well, we have time for just one more question, and I wanted to make it this one because everyone is in such a challenging space with COVID and the separation. And you mentioned before we started the hit the record button that this relational field and this connection that we feel and empathy we feel with clients or each other is available through Zoom. The touch, while wonderful and we miss it, all humans are missing it, that there is a way here. And maybe you could just share a little bit about that as kind of our last
Sure.
chat.
It's been very interesting for me because COVID completely changed my practice. Now I do distant craniosacral, biodynamic craniosacral sessions. And I didn't know that I could do those before. I'd been doing the nutritional kinesiology on Zoom, but going into work and seeing people. So now I work 2 days doing distant work and then 1 day in person. And both are very important. The distant work can be so supportive of people and can be still very co-regulatory, and in terms of their nervous system, it can really, big shifts can happen. It's really quite powerful. And in some ways, you don't have all of the, I had to drive to get here and find a parking spot. And they're just in their home. And there is like a level of safety that's there sometimes that doesn't happen as quickly when you see someone in person. So that's been quite interesting. Yet, on the other side of the scale, like last week, I had a client that is a young lady, lovely young lady, woman, lives alone and not working. And I said, I think you should come see me. She's local. Why don't you come see me? And then when I finally got to see her, not on Zoom, but in person, I was like, I'd really like you to come every week. Like, you need to see a human being who we can talk, someone that not just at a grocery store, you know, and we can just I can just hold your feet and do the craniosacral work, and you can just be with me and just be with another human being and regulate like in a real body to body way of being. And um, so it's been really interesting, like, because I think they're both quite powerful.
Hmm.
And I guess, I mean, I really love the distant work, but I don't think I would completely change over to all distant work because there just is something that's so innately powerful, like in our systems about being touched,
Yeah.
putting your hands on somebody and not necessarily even saying anything, but just holding their feet or holding their sacrum or holding their cranial vault and just being with them. That is irreplaceable. Yet the distant work, there's a lot more spiritual realm that comes in
Hmm.
that work because you're not sensing as much into that physicality and negotiating that physical space. So you're feeling into the bigger field more easily. I'm gonna pause that for a second. So I don't know if I answered your question, but
You did. No, I think it's just it's interesting because there's value in this new way that you didn't know before being forced to figure it out, and that I think is a trauma resilience in and of itself, figuring out a new way for what we're presented with in the moment. It was really,
I
really
think,
cool.
and I think the big thing is that like in an animal sense, because humans are animals, we are, you know, a lot of us are a lot of our being way we are, our nervous system is it's in our animal part. And our animal selves do well with connecting with other people, be it on Zoom, but nonverbal touch, just putting your hands on somebody is has its own special power that's connects to some really deep, deep, deep tribal, like human animal parts.
Yeah. Well, that's actually all the time we have.
Well,
I
great.
think our dogs, I hear my dog doing something out there too. They're all tuned in. um, so for folks listening, Kate, will you say your website, please?
Yeah, it's Dr. Kate Klemer. It's all one word, no punctuation. And there's one drkateklemer.com, and there's only one M in my last name.
Okay, perfect. And so everybody check out all the things she offers locally and online. And the school sounds amazing, divine structure. So yeah, hopefully maybe we can get you to New Mexico one day and have your training.
I would love it. I'm going to teach advanced training. I'm going to put one together for distant work. So,
Oh, awesome. Cool.
so
Well, let us know about that. So,
thank you so
okay.
much, Bella.
Thank you. Have a beautiful, beautiful day.